Christina's going.
To call the meeting to order. We'll start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provision of the Act, the Sussex-Wantage Regional School District Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the school building and notice of said meeting sent to the New Jersey Herald and the Star Ledger.
Sussex-Wantage School Mission Statement. The Sussex-Wantage Regional School District is a responsive, caring, child-centered community. Our mission is to educate each individual to become a confident, competent, lifelong learner and productive, responsible citizen by providing challenging opportunities in a safe environment through a partnership of families, schools, and communities.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to do the certification of the election results. These are the results of the November 3rd, 2020 general election, and they are as follows. For elected member Board of Education, Wantage Township for a 3-year term, Robert Hayden had 2,335 votes. Cassandra Jenks had 2,170 votes. Nicholas D'Agostino had 3,442 votes. Courtney DeWall Malafite, hopefully I said that right, 2,552 votes. Kristen Cooper Trinidad had 2,460 votes, and there were 239 write-in votes. At this time, we're going to do the oath of office for the new board members and also the Mr. D'Agostino. So we can do them simultaneously if you have that in front of you.
Yes, you're unmuted. Yes. Good.
And you're just going to start out, I, and then state your name, and then you can go and read the first paragraph.
All right. I, Nicholas D'Agostino, do solemnly swear. You guys can read it at the same time.
Oh, yeah, you guys can all do it at the same time.
Okay. All right, I'll start over. Ready? I, Nicholas D'Agostino, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the government established in the United States and of the state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Nicholas D'Agostino, do solemnly swear or affirm that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for office of member of Board of Education, and that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, nor disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJS 18A 12-1, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
So help me God.
Okay, congratulations, Nick, and
Congratulations.
the 2 new board members. At this time, we're going to take a roll call. Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Here.
Mrs. Craig?
Here.
Ms. DeWall Malafite?
Here.
Mr. Giuliano?
Here.
Mrs. Ranzan?
Here.
Mrs. Steele?
Here.
Mrs. Stahl?
Here.
Mrs. Whitty? Mr. D'Agostino?
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay, at this time, I will be taking nominations for board president.
I would like to nominate Nick D'Agostino.
Okay, Mr. Giuliano, do we have a second?
Okay.
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Stahl.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Stahl.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other nominations for president?
Yes, I had nominated Colleen Ranzan.
Okay, Mrs. Craig. Do we have any seconds?
I'll second.
And who is that? I'm sorry.
Mrs. Steele?
Okay, Mrs. Steele. Okay, any other nominations at this time? Okay, we're gonna first take a roll call on the nomination by Mr. Giuliano for Mr. DiAgostino as president. Mr. Giuliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
No.
Ms. DeWall Malafite?
Yes.
Ms. Ranzan?
I abstain.
Mrs. Steele?
No.
Ms. Whitty is not here. Mr. DiAgostino?
Yes.
Motion carries. Francis, just in order of business, do I need to take a roll call on the second one since this one passed?
No.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to turn the podium, the virtual podium, over to Mr. DiAgostino.
All right. At this time, we are going to take nominations for vice president. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Colleen Ranzan.
All right. Are there any other nominations for vice president?
We need a second, Nick.
I'm sorry. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Stahl.
Thank you, Mrs. Stahl. Are there any other nominations? All right. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Abstain?
Ms. DeWall Malafite?
Abstain.
Mr. Giuliano?
Yes.
Ms. Ranzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. DiAgostino?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Congratulations, Mrs. Ranzan.
Thank you.
Congratulations. At this time, we will move on to the report of the superintendent of schools.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. Just want to congratulate Mr. D'Agostino, Ms. Ranzan, and welcome our new board members. It's going to be a pleasure working with you. Just want to give everyone a little update on our COVID-19 operations. As you know, this week we're remote. Our goal has always been to keep schools open so long as we can do so safely. Unfortunately, as we've mentioned before, we're currently operating under the Department of Health's orange designation, which complicates things for our operations concerning instances of COVID or perceived instances of COVID. So as you've experienced prior to break, I mean, it makes it extraordinarily difficult to operate. We expect a new report to come out tomorrow. Generally, every Thursday, the reports come out. So we'll look to give the community an update by Friday for next week. You know, we'd like to be in next week. Unfortunately, again, because of the orange designation, you know, the past 2 days, I've already got 5 staff members who've contacted us who are required to go into quarantine. So there's always complications like that. So in short, we'll be releasing a survey to the community to gauge stakeholder perspectives about a couple of different issues. One is the length of our virtual instruction. You know, how's that been working for folks on a full day capacity, in particular at Sussex Middle School? You know, we've gotten feedback that perhaps switching to a half-day schedule where the afternoon kids could meet one-on-one with teachers or in small groups might be more beneficial to the students actually in their attention span. So that's something we'd be looking to gauge from the community. And stakeholder perceptions on operating under orange. You know, basically, you know, as we've experienced, it's just basically going to be inconsistent. And it's going to be dictated by the number of perceived cases that we have, the actual cases that we have. So it complicates things. We'll be hosting a pandemic response team in the meeting in the near future to talk about brainstorming potential re-entries for both cohorts. That's, down the line. I'm not saying we're doing that now, but talking about brainstorming, what that would look like, what would we have to do to achieve that? What would the Department of Health reports look like for us to be able to achieve that? Those kinds of things. Want to offer special thanks to Mrs. Riker and her team. They continue to oversee the food dissemination operations, really just doing a remarkable job with that. Just a note for Mrs. Wilson, before break, we had heard some feedback about our pre-K program, and we charged her with the responsibility to try to facilitate bringing back both cohorts. And she's able, working with parents and stakeholders, to do that, albeit on a half-day basis where the groups flip. But that would be taking place approximately 1 week after the general group returns back. So that's all I had, Mr. D'Agostino. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. At this time, we will move on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about matters of the interest to the district. Do we have any audience remarks, Mr. Dahl?
I do not for this juncture. Thank you.
And is the email still the same, Mr. Kronsky, or did you update it for the new year? For the comments?
I didn't, and it was already posted, so we'll update it for the next one, but it's BOE 2020 as of now.
Sure. So again, that's BOE 2020 at Sussex-Wantage or swregional.org. Sorry. If you would have a public comment for the next portion. At this time, we will move on to the board secretary certification, please.
If we could just ask, before you do that, Mr. D'Agostino, gotten some feedback. Anyone who's not currently talking, if you could just hit the mute on your device, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Who's 2-8? There we go. If everyone could just mute your mic, we have some background noise on the.
Yeah, I think it might be from the cell phones. I don't know if the cell phone folks know how to mute.
How would you do that, Mr. Kronsky? Is it star? Mr. Kronsky, how do you mute a cell phone?
*6.
*6. There we go. Thank you. Can we get the board secretary certification, please?
Yes, pursuant to NJAC 6A23A-16.10C3, I certify that as of November 30th, 2020, no line item account has encumbrances and expenditures which in total exceed the line item appropriation in violation of NJAC 6A23A-16.10A.
Thank you. At this time, we will move on to the approval of board minutes for October 28th, 2020, regular and executive session, and November 18th, 2020, regular and executive session. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
I'll motion.
Thank you. And a second?
Ransdale will second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Giuliano.
Yes.
Mrs. Ranzan.
I abstain on October 28th and November 18th, yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad.
Abstain for both.
Mrs. Craig.
Yes. Yeah.
Ms. DeWall Malafite.
I abstain for both.
Mrs. Steele.
Yes.
Mrs. Stoll.
Abstain for October both, and yes to November both.
Mr. D'Agostino.
Yes. Also, I believe Mrs. Woody is here now, Mrs. Riker.
I am.
Hello, Mrs. Woody.
Okay, sorry. How long have you been here, Mrs. Whitty?
7:07.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see it come in.
I'm sorry for being late. I apologize.
No problem.
I just want to
All
write
right,
that down. Hold on.
Yeah, she'll vote.
So, Mrs. Whitty, would you like to vote?
Yes, on the minutes, yes to both.
Okay, minutes are approved.
Thank you. And Mrs. Riker, it's I believe it's Dual Mala Fight. Just for
Okay,
reference.
thank you.
No problem. We don't need an executive session for agenda items, so we will move on to the presentation of agenda items, please.
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. Under personnel, I'd like to move items 1 through 27.
Looking for a motion for personnel 1 through 27.
Rand
I'll make a
Zandel.
motion.
Thank you. Looking for a second.
I'll second. I don't know who motioned. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on personnel? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Ranzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Abstain.
All right, now, Nick, I think I already forgot what you told me. Ms. DeWall Malafit? Fight?
Yes.
Malafite?
Malafite.
Sorry. It'd be better if we had met in person.
It's okay. I abstain.
I'm gonna write myself a little thing there. Mr. Giuliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Under policy, I'd like to move items 1 through 3.
All right, looking for a motion, please.
I'll make a motion.
All right, looking for a second.
Giuliano.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
All right, I'm sorry, was that Mrs. Stahl and then Mrs. Whitty?
Yep, it was a tie between Mrs. Woody and Mr. Julian.
Okay,
You could pick whoever you like more.
okay.
All
It's so difficult this way.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a lag. So there's no discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Abstain.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. DeWall Malafit? Fight?
I abstain.
Mr. Giuliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Ranzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Under finance, I'd like to move items 1 through 10.
All right, looking for a motion, please.
Rand Zandel motion.
Thank you. Looking for a second.
So I'll
Thank you.
second.
Any discussion on finance? All right, roll call, please.
Ms. Ranzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad?
Abstain.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. DeWall Malafite?
I abstain.
Mr. Giuliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitty?
Yeah.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, did we have any curriculum? No? Are we done? All right. At this time, we will move on to unfinished business. Does anyone on the board have any unfinished business they would like to discuss?
I think this is unfinished, but it could be new business. Before COVID hit last year, I think Dorothy brought up the fact that maybe it would be a good idea to bring up like snow days, like a snow day meeting. And I know in December, we were hit kind of by surprise. And by the time, now we know we can do it remotely. And by the time we figured it out, it was too late. And I think it just puts the district in a bad position, especially with personnel. And so I just wanted to bring that discussion back up. Like, is there a possibility that we just put down that if we can't for any reason meet as a group, it's going to be remote?
Yeah, I don't know if Mrs. Riker or Francis can weigh in on that. Is it possible for public notice for a board meeting, or you can research it if you need to, and we can come back to it, to, aim for the goal of having it in person, but if we can't, for some unforeseen reason, have a backup as a virtual meeting?
What would be the purpose of the board meeting, though, other than to discuss in advance how the snow day would be converted to a virtual? Because
no, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Ranzan's referring to a snow day for the board meeting, like a makeup day, right, Mrs. Ranzan?
Yeah.
Yeah, not a snow day for school. Like, well, we have an in-person board meeting scheduled, for example, next month. If we can't have that meeting because there's inclement weather or some unforeseen reason, can we have that designated as a virtual backup plan, right?
I think something I could definitely look into. Some thoughts would be perhaps to add a virtual link as a backup, because the whole purpose with advertising meetings, right? You have to advertise the location, the time, and all of that. So if you have an in-person meeting and then all of a sudden you have to default to virtual, usually there's not enough time to advertise that location, which is the meeting link. So that is something to consider, and I can confirm that, but that's a good idea to have maybe a backup virtual link, which is almost like a rain date, right? A snow location.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I think with COVID, now we know that we can do this. And, I think it kind of put personnel behind the 8 ball in January because we had to approve it, even though we give him carte blanche to approve things like that. But without, like, if I was a teacher, which I am, but if I didn't have the board approval, I'm not sure I would have given my district notice.
Yeah.
Could we add that to the advertisement as like a just in case, so it's advertised as both?
Yeah, I think Francis said she basically firm that up and make sure that that's permissible and how to word that, and then would forward that to the board to see, if we wanted to firm up that we'd want to do that. I think it first manifested, was it last year when we had that down power line in back of Sussex Middle School, and we had to cancel that meeting that day.
Squirrel. The only thing I think is brought up before about that too is, like, what if it's a snowstorm and the power's out? Then we can't do virtual either. But I guess you could always create any scenario where you can, it gets worse and worse. So,
Can I just ask something, Mr. Kronsky? Are you on the line? Can you hear this?
Yeah.
So if we were to pre-advertise our meetings in advance with a link, would you be able to do that?
Yeah, we would have to set up the link, but we could also say, go to Sussex-Wantage, swregional.org for the link. I don't know if that's good enough. Francis will have to check on that.
Yeah, I will.
Because we're generating the link to correspond with the Google Meet, and if the Google Meet hasn't been created yet, it would just be creating a meet every time. So I'm sure we can make it happen.
Yeah, I just wanted you to weigh in on that because I wasn't sure if that was possible to advertise that.
The problem is, and I guess if you're running them from the house, if you got 4 feet of snow and everybody's coming because we still come to the board meeting to set it up to stream and everything else. So we would have to have a discussion about it.
Well, last year when I had brought this up, I wasn't even talking about virtual, but I thought about having a backup date each month. for such reasons, because everybody said things, about the weather, about the power down. But a backup date, I still do not believe there's no reason why we shouldn't have an already prearranged backup date. Chances are we are not going to use that backup date. But if we need it, we have it. Last year, there was, people didn't agree. It was going to be hard because we have spring concerts. We have band concerts. It's hard to get another date. It's hard to make the backup date. Well, now we don't have that. So now we have more dates available to have a backup date. So I think that I strongly think that we need to do this because once again, we've missed the last meeting of a year. We do have people that, that had volunteered to be board members and are leaving, and they leave that way. There's official business that needs to be done. We are in the middle of a COVID situation. Last year, there were 2 meetings in a row that we missed. First, it was the squirrel, and then it was Thanksgiving. So there were 2 months that we didn't have a meeting. We didn't have a meeting from September till December. So it's very simple to have a backup date, not just for December, January, and February, a backup date. Again, chances are we're not going to use it. You advertise it as a backup date. It means that the board meeting is tonight. If for whatever reason we can't have that board meeting tonight, we will be having the board meeting, whatever that next date is, whether it be the following night, the following Wednesday, or what have you. Chances are we're not going to use it. It's a Murphy's Law thing. But we need to be more prepared that way. Thank you, Colleen, for bringing it up.
No problem, Dorothy.
Is there any other discussion on that or any other unfinished business? All right, we'll move on to new business. Is there any new business the board would like to discuss?
This Native American language group is used along the east.
Any new business? All right. So on the scheduling thing, we need to have a discussion about availability. Mr. Wall-Malafite just recently was accepted into a paramedic program. She didn't know, number one, if she would be accepted, when it would be what days it would be on, and then if it would be at night or in the afternoon. It turns out it's going to be every Monday night, Wednesday night, and Saturday all day. So I had spoken to people that I know were going to have a conflict for sure in their schedule if we were to switch the day. The initial thought was to move it to the board meetings potentially to Tuesdays, but another board member works on Tuesday nights, and then Thursdays another board member works on Thursday nights. So to include everybody and make sure that nobody misses 6 months in a row. The most fair thing that I was able to come up with was to do like a rotating schedule for the next 6 months. And then we could probably do Tuesdays starting in July, but it would be Tuesday in January, Wednesday in February, Thursday in April, Tuesday in April, Wednesday in May, and Thursday in July. It would be July 1st. A couple of the meetings would have to move to April 1st, July 1st, based off of where they are now. Otherwise, Ms. Wall-Malafite would have to miss every meeting. If we moved it till Tuesday, that would put the burden on the other board member to have to take off of work every Tuesday, every month. And if it was Thursday, likewise. I know I talked to a couple of you about this already that I knew would have a conflict, and we were able to talk about it. But is anybody not available going forward on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays? Is there a conflict there?
Well, we had a conversation, Nick, about it, and these poor women don't know me, but I don't support going different nights. I'm a teacher. I'm remote learning. I don't want to go on Saturday, Tuesdays or Thursdays or Wednesdays, and if you can't meet the obligation of the Board of Education, then maybe you have to reevaluate your position.
Yeah,
I won't support this.
Yeah, I respect that. But again, I would have, if anybody had a conflict, I would have done the same thing. And I don't think it's a good message to send when somebody wants to serve their community, and wants to be able to further their life, their education, and
I respect it. I respect it. And, Courtney, I respect what you're doing, and the paramedic, I applaud you for doing it and furthering your career. But I don't think we should change a meeting for one person. And I told you that.
Yeah, you absolutely did.
Well, and I also think there's a continuity when it comes to the public. I mean, now it's like ring around the rosy of when we're going to be in, when we're not going to be in. And there's again, a lack of continuity during a really difficult time. I have to agree with Colleen and Courtney. I love you. I've known you forever and ever. You're like a kid to me. But I appreciate what you're doing. I know what you do in the community, but I have to agree. We can't rearrange the schedule for one person. It just may not be the time that, because she's going to further herself, which I respect, and serve the community, which I respect at the utmost. I agree. We can't change it for one person. And I think the continuity to the public is lacking, and I don't agree with it. Won't support it.
I want to ask Mrs. Ranzan and Mrs. Craig, is there any sort of scheduling conflict, or do you disagree with it?
Can I say something, please?
Sure.
I think maybe I'm a little lost here, but you're asking to have board meeting nights changed, like regular
Correct.
board meeting changed, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm not even sure why this is a topic, and I think that you should have probably talked to somebody beforehand. And I don't know. It's probably in a policy.
Dorothy, I second that as well, Dorothy, because I had heard nothing about this until I talked to another board member, because the communication on the part of the president is zero. So I appreciate that.
To be fair, Mrs. Craig. Go ahead, Mrs. Woody.
Hold on, wait a second. Relax. I've been around a long time. These meetings are always on a Wednesday night. It's just how it is. There is no, we can't do this, not for any other reason other than the fact that the school's policy meetings on Wednesday nights. There's enough changes going on in the world. We don't need to add to. I'd known it beforehand because my words are a little scrambled right now. But if there's a vote, this my vote that way. I don't understand why we're having this conversation, to be honest.
I think
to go back to your original question, Nick, is no, I don't have obligations. The only obligation is I'm a teacher. I'm a mother of two. I have a husband. I'm a very busy woman. So Wednesdays, I don't make any plans. Wednesdays, if there's a concert, I miss it. If there's, or I don't come. No, I don't work at night. But I just don't think that we should. And I agree with Jenny with the continuity of the public. They won't know when it is or where. It's always been on Wednesday nights.
If I could just chime in quickly, Mr. President, if you would allow me to.
Sure.
I understand the difficulty in changing a meeting schedule that has been for a time on a particular day of the week. But, each and every board member has been elected to serve on the Board of Education, not based upon their availabilities on a particular day, but based upon what the constituents find are qualities that they think would bring, be an asset to the Board of Education. I think that technology really helps us these days with reminders that board meetings are coming, whether you set it for a day or two, you set it for a week in advance to remind you the meeting date. I think it obviously would be an adjustment and, would be probably challenging at first, but I think as a Board of Education, the community elected a body of individuals to serve. And I think the board has an obligation to work together to find when it is possible to meet so that as a collective, everybody can govern the school district. That is my point of view. I think that I don't see the ability for board members not to attend meetings or have meetings because of this agreement. I think that there's a greater obligation here to find a schedule that works to the greatest extent possible for everybody, if it can be done.
Thank you.
And though I respect your, those words, I understand that. but just by Nick's statement alone, then somebody else is going to be blocked out of another meeting. So we have a board member who's sitting, who's been here and committed and been doing the job, and they're going to miss out because we're going to have to switch the meeting, if I understood that correctly. So then we're actually taking somebody out. So I just don't see the fairness in that.
It would be a conflict for them, but Ms. Malphite's schedule is not flexible at all. The other two board members stated to me that they would be able to attend all 6 months. So the only board member that won't be able to attend 2 out of the 6 months in this scenario is Mr. Malphite, because she is not able to miss class.
Now, I have an input on this. This is Mrs. Steele. Now, with my work schedule has been a lot different. I'm closing a lot to be home with my son for his remote work. So I would prefer them to stay on Wednesday nights because I'm off, but I can rearrange my schedule to not miss any meetings if it came down to it.
Well,
right, which is what my point was, that you have been a sitting member for 2 years. So then that automatically bumps you out when we're not on Wednesdays. So in response to Francis's words, which I understand and respect greatly, then you're taking somebody who ran, was elected, has put in 2 years of service, and now we're telling her because we want to reorganize the date night or the meeting nights, that then she can't be here when we were full well aware of Mrs. Steele's schedule. So I can't support it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Nick, if I could just say something, not that it matters, but currently on Tuesdays, we do food distribution till 7 p.m. And on Wednesdays, we only do it to 6 p.m. because of the board meetings. We would have to, based on this scenario, I would have to juggle it almost week by week, which may be an issue, or change it all together. I'm not sure. I'd have to think it through. I'd have to look at your schedule, but that does pose a difficulty for the food distribution.
What about
I think that would be way too much for the community.
Agreed. And we were sending Christina out there during the most difficult days to hand out the food. So now we're going to put that on the line? I'm sorry. It's ridiculous.
Mrs. Raker, what about Thursday nights as far as the food distribution?
Well, we're handing food out for an entire week. So we do it earlier in the week because they're getting 5 days worth of meals, or 3 days worth of meals when we're back in. So the beginning, Mondays, food service didn't want to do Mondays because distributing that many meals, they wouldn't have time to prepare it. So we do it Tuesday and Wednesday. So Tuesday we did 4 to 7, and tonight, because we had the board meeting, I did till 6 o'clock. It takes, a few minutes. I didn't get back here till like 6:20 before the board meeting by the time we get everything back. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but it would be a change to what we've been doing since March.
Okay.
Not at the top of your head, but do we have more people that pick up on Tuesdays?
Yeah. Yesterday I had, we distributed almost 400 meals.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
It is
amazing. And again, thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Mrs. Cooper Trinidad, you're on mute, just so you know too. If we were to, based off going off of, take Tuesdays out of the equation and do Wednesday, Thursday, and I understand if you wouldn't be able to make it, every Thursday, because I know you work Thursday nights. But if it was rotating Wednesdays and Thursdays till July, would you be amenable to that for the food distribution?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that would be fine. I'm very flexible.
Okay.
I've been sitting on the board for 2 years, and I made myself available to anyone on the board, to Mr. Gall, to anyone as a public, the neighbor, other parents. At any time they tried to get me, I've tried to make myself available. This board does not consist of a meeting on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. However, that is when the meetings have been.
I understand. Yep. I understand
this conversation, and I right now I'm going to say to the public, I'm very sorry that you need to be listening to this, because there should be no reason to.
Yeah, well,
This
again,
is-
I wanted to have the discussion as a board, you know, and
We're not
that's why we're
talking
having
about
the
a
discussion. so.
concert. We're talking about changing the board meetings. We're not talking
Right.
about changing concerts.
We're talking about changing the board meetings to accommodate the people that the public elected to serve
Right,
their
and not
community.
once, Nick, have you brought up or had that conversation with Megan, and you have a sitting board member that just told
Oh,
you
no,
That's
no,
not
no,
true.
he
not
did.
comfortable with
No, he
changing it.
did. We did have a conversation about it. He did ask me, we talked about it weeks ago. Like I
But
said, I
I'm
would
basing
prefer
it
to
on
stay
what
on
you just
Wednesday
said.
night. I would prefer to stay on Wednesday nights because I'm off, but I can accommodate with my work schedule.
Right.
Right, I'm basing it on what you just said, that Wednesday, you'd prefer to keep it to Wednesday is what I just heard. So that's what I'm aware of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And her conflict is on Tuesday.
I believe that the board members should be trying to accommodate and help the school district.
Yeah,
Right,
well, I mean, unfortunately, Mrs. Woody, the board members can't switch their school schedule if their school is a certain night. Otherwise, with work, you have more flexibility. With a paramedic program, you don't. That's the problem here.
I said, if she can't meet her obligation, she has to think about resigning. I mean, we're not talking about all the board members, and I understand it. And again, she doesn't know me. She's probably thinking that I'm a real witch. But the thing is that you have 8 board members here who it's always been on Wednesdays. And because one board member can't take it because she's doing something phenomenal, then I don't even know why we're having this conversation.
I want to chime in here. I want to chime in. Can I chime in, please?
Sure, Mr. Giuliano.
I think this is silliness. I have been on the board. I served for a year. Nowhere in my oath that I took did it say Wednesday night board meetings I shall attend. I swear to God. All right. Somebody's got a conflict. I think it should be amenable, the workout, and it shouldn't be an argument if everybody can do it. Nobody's saying, oh, okay, I'll look at my schedule, I can do it. Everybody's saying, no, this is ridiculous, make her resign. That's silly.
Right. I agree, Mr. Giuliano.
I'm by no means saying that she should resign. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this is a bigger picture than just the 9 of us.
But everybody can concur, find a date and concur instead of arguing about it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, I thank you, Mr. Giuliano. I appreciate that. And to your point, nobody said they have a conflict. They said they don't like it, which,
No, I never said I don't like it. Yeah. I'm saying that I feel like with everything going on is that, okay, April's going to be Tuesdays, May's is going to be Wednesdays. It's just a lot. And as though Francis said something about technology, we have parents that don't use technology. They have a hard time getting their children to find Google Classroom, and we're expecting them to go onto the website and find out when the board meeting is. I'm not arguing.
Yeah. Well, and beyond that, we'll also have to factor in what Christina said about the meals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're going to take Tuesdays out of the equation. I think what we're going to do, because it's not a majority of the board that doesn't want to do this, and nobody has a scheduling conflict except for Ms. Duamalfe and Ms. Cooper Trinidad, and both of them want to make this work. So I think what we'll do is we'll rotate for the next 6 months between Wednesday and Thursday. We'll keep the January meeting the way it is, and then I think Ms. Verbress, correct me if I'm wrong, we could codify it, whatever you want to call it, at that meeting. But
does it have to come to a vote, Nick?
Yeah, I believe it. I don't know. Does it need to be voted on, Ms. Verbress?
Any calendar change needs to be voted on by the board.
The meeting schedule does have to be voted on. Since it's not available now, and I guess it's in the process of being developed, next month's agenda perhaps would be when you can establish or propose meeting dates.
Okay. Again, but I would ask the board to try to support their fellow board members, and this is obviously a thankless job at times, and so I think we need to try to include everybody. I'm sorry, Mrs. Woody.
I need to support the community and the district, and Wednesday nights has been what it's been.
There's the other school districts have changed their board meeting schedules to accommodate board members.
Well, Nick,
You know,
and even if you're talking about changing the schedule, you're talking about having 2 different dates, and you're talking about, 1 month one time, 1 month the next time, So that alone isn't going to be great.
understand.
Even changing the weekday, the day of the week, might at least end up being solid, but changing different dates, different months,
I understand.
Right
Yeah,
now,
no,
people do it Wednesday. They want to go. They think about it. They always think about it on a Wednesday. So if you want to change the day of the week, it's a heck of a lot better than Wednesday this month, Thursday next month.
Mrs. Cooper Trinidad, how, not to put you on the spot, your first meeting, but I guess, everyone's on the spot already. How flexible is your schedule with work on Thursdays? If it's like once a month on a Thursday, and if it's not, that's totally fine.
I can definitely work around that.
Okay. So to what Mrs. Woody said, would you support changing it to a Thursday night, the board meetings going forward every month on Thursday night? Would that be a good compromise that we could all support?
I would support that.
Okay.
Sure, I support that.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that's why I wanted to talk about it. So then, Ms. Verbress, as far as January, are we able to change, now that we have a board consensus, can we change that to a Thursday so Mr. Wall-Malafite would not miss it and then vote on it then? Are we able to temporarily do that?
Nick, Mr. D'Agostino, if I could just interject, when we go into executive session, we're going to talk about some legal advice pertaining to budgetary process, and that may be complicated by the specific date. And I'd ask you to hold off on that notion until we figure that out. We finalize that piece.
January 27th?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can, we'll work around it. So, all right. So now that everybody knows, what the situation is, I appreciate all of your input.
I just have one question.
For Mrs. Stahl. Go ahead.
Yeah. Did they know that the meetings were on Wednesdays when they ran for office?
Yes. And she, it's parts, right? So she didn't know whether she would be elected first. Then she didn't know there was I don't even know what the percentage is. I'm not going to pretend to know, but a chance that, a good chance that she could get accepted, a good chance she couldn't. It's a very competitive program. And then once she was accepted, she had no idea what date she knew it would be a couple days a week, but she didn't know what days it would be on. And then once it was what day it's on, she didn't know if it would be nighttime or daytime, afternoon or nighttime. So it just kind of was a perfect storm of she won the election, she got accepted to the school, she has class on Wednesday nights, and it's at nighttime, like I said. So it's a bridge that we have to cross, in my opinion. So again, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding that? All right, any other new business that you guys have? All right, I just wanted to thank Mrs. Riker. The board's made aware recently of unemployment claims that were made by staff, not a majority, but by staff members, 75 to be exact. And Mrs. Riker, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the bill was for $134,000 that was paid out in unemployment claims, and the district is currently ascertaining whether or not that those are legitimate. Again, Mrs. Riker is disputing those. And as stewards of the taxpayer, I think it's important that the taxpayers, are aware of this challenge that we're currently having, and also, of all the work that Mrs. Riker has put in to try to, protect the taxpayer. So again, as an individual, not speaking on behalf of the board, I'm not sure when we didn't have any reduction in force, any reduction in hours, why these claims were made. It's a little confusing to me personally, but again, I just wanted to publicly thank Mrs. Riker because she has put in, basically a second job's worth of hours into this. That's all the good business I have. With that, if nobody has any other new business, we'll move on to audience remarks. Did any?
Thank you, Mr. D'Agostino. I just have one from Miss Sarah Moss. She indicates, I'm writing on behalf of Mrs. Wagner, another teacher in the district, and herself. I'd like to take the time to recognize Mrs. Rand, kindergarten assistant, for going above and beyond during the school year, especially. She never misses a day, often comes in early, and always stays late to make sure whatever the job is, that it gets done. Her dedication is appreciated and does not go unnoticed. Thank you, Mrs. Rand.
Thank you. No other comments, Mr. Galt?
No, sir. I'll just remind you about the executive session.
Yeah, so we're going to go into executive session. No action will be taken. I don't even know virtually if we'll be able to come back to the public, but how long, in case we are coming back?
I would approximate it at 45 minutes, but it may not go that long.
Okay, so approximately 45 minutes. Can I get the resolution, please, Mrs. Riker?
Yes, whereas pursuant to NJSA 10-4-12B, the Sussex-Wantage Regional Board of Education may exclude the public from that portion of a public meeting at which the board discusses any of the matters described at NJSA 10-4-12B 1 through 9. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Sussex-Wantage Regional Board of Education shall enter into closed session to discuss legal matters and a grievance. Now, therefore, it be it further resolved by the Sussex-Wantage Regional Board of Education that pursuant to NJSA 10-4-13B, the time when and circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public is when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
All right, thank you. Looking for a motion, please, to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Craig,
I'll
looking for a second. Thank you, Mrs. Steele. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then we'll just wait a couple minutes.
I'm just going to take a little brief
We're back.
You can actually get the screen replaced. If you go to Verizon, you can get the screen replaced.
Nick, I'll tell you about that story another time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we're back in public. I'm gonna look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll
make a motion.
Everyone's
second it.
excited about that. And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, let us know when we're